Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to be talking all about unwinding anxiety.
That's right, by Judson Brewer.
Yes.
It's a really great book. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. And I think the thing that I found so interesting about this book is that he himself has had like a really interesting journey.
He's had a lot of experience with anxiety and addiction.
Right.
And he brings that into the book.
Exactly. So he's not just talking at you like from an ivory tower or something.
Oh, no.
And he also brings this really interesting perspective because he is both a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist.
Right, so he can really bridge that gap between the science
Exactly.
and the lived experience.
So I thought we could just jump right in.
Okay, sounds great.
Because one of the things that I found so fascinating about this book was the way he explained anxiety and where it comes from. And he starts by taking us way back.
He does, back to our evolutionary history.
Right.
To our ancestors and how anxiety really helped them survive.
He uses the example of if you're walking and then all of a sudden you see like a car speeding towards you.
Oh.
You know, you're going to jump back.
Right, your body just reacts.
Right. And so this is how our brains learn to avoid danger. It's like this primal response.
It's like a hardwired survival mechanism.
Right. And he talks about how fear triggers this response.
Right.
And then you jump back and you're safe, and that reinforces the fear response.
It's called negative reinforcement.
Oh, wait.
Where you're basically learning to avoid something unpleasant.
So that makes sense, like in a, caveman situation.
Yeah.
But how does that actually apply to us in the modern world? Because we're not really running from tigers anymore, are we?
Well, not literally, but our brains haven't quite caught up with the times. You know, we have this part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex,
Right.
which is responsible for planning and predicting, and it's constantly trying to anticipate threats.
Okay.
But the problem is, in today's world, there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
So much we just don't know and can't control.
So our brains just kind of go into overdrive trying to fill in the gaps.
Exactly. They try to predict the future. And without enough information,
Right.
they get anxious and start creating all sorts of worst-case scenarios.
Look, what if this happens? What if that happens?
Right, exactly.
And so that's how we end up feeling anxious, even though we're not in any real danger.
Right, it's like our imaginations are running wild with all these potential threats.
He uses a really good example in the book. He talks about the COVID pandemic
Oh, yeah.
and how so much anxiety arose from that because everything was new.
Right, there was so much uncertainty at the beginning. Nobody knew what was going to happen or how bad it would be.
It makes sense that our brains would just latch on to that
And try to make sense of it.
and come up with the worst case scenarios.
Right, because that's what our brains are wired to do.
Okay, so this is where things get really, really interesting for me.
I'm intrigued.
He talks about how we can actually become addicted to worry.
Addicted to worry.
I know at first I was like, wait, what? That doesn't sound right.
I know it sounds counterintuitive.
But then he explained it in terms of these things called habit loops.
Habit loops. Yeah, he breaks it down really well.
So how does this work with anxiety?
Well, he explains that habit loops consist of a trigger, a behavior, and a reward.
And we usually think of that in terms of like drugs or alcohol.
Exactly, like substance addiction.
But he says it can apply to anything.
It can even apply to anxiety.
So what's the reward in worrying, though? It doesn't feel good.
Well, it's not like a pleasurable feeling, but it's more like a sense of control.
Okay.
When we worry, it feels like we're doing something, even if it's just in our heads.
So it's like we're tricking ourselves into thinking that we're solving the problem.
Exactly, and that illusion of control becomes the reward.
And that reinforces the whole habit loop.
Right, so we get stuck in this cycle of anxiety.
And that's why it's so hard to break free.
Exactly, because our brains have learned that worrying is somehow helpful.
So we're basically training our brains to be anxious.
In a way, yeah.
This is blowing my mind.
I know it's a lot to take in.
And he actually draws a parallel between this and his patients who struggle with addiction.
Oh, really?
He had this realization that the way they were describing their struggles with craving and clinging was similar to his own experiences with meditation.
That's fascinating.
He was noticing these same patterns in himself.
So it's like this universal mechanism in the brain
It seems like it.
that can get hijacked by all sorts of things.
Whether it's substances or thoughts or behaviors.
Exactly. And anxiety is just one example of that.
So it's not just about individual brain quirks. Then he also talks about how modern life kind of fuels this anxiety beast.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about how the constant stimulation and the rapid pace of our lives can really amplify anxiety.
I know.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with information and demands.
And it's hard to keep up.
It is, and it's designed to be that way.
What do you mean?
Well, he makes this really interesting comparison between buying shoes in the 1800s
Okay.
and buying shoes today.
Right.
Back then, if you needed new shoes, you'd have to go to the cobbler place and order.
And wait weeks.
Exactly. And that whole process allowed desires to naturally fade.
But now we can just buy anything we want instantly.
With a click of a button.
So we're constantly being tempted.
And bombarded with choices.
Which makes it harder to resist those urges.
Exactly.
And this is where it gets a little bit, I don't know, maybe controversial.
How so?
Well, he talks about how companies actually exploit this vulnerability.
Oh, right.
They design apps and content that are specifically designed to keep us hooked.
Could keep us coming back for more.
Yeah, like those social media algorithms.
Exactly. They're designed to trigger our dopamine receptors.
And keep us craving that next hit.
And that can definitely contribute to anxiety.
So we're caught in this vicious cycle. Our brains are wired for anxiety. Modern life throws fuel on the fire.
And companies profit from our unease.
It's a bit bleak, isn't it?
It can feel that way. But Brewer doesn't leave us hanging. He offers a path forward.
Okay, I'm all ears.
He suggests mindfulness as a powerful tool to break free from these anxious habit loops.
Yes, have you heard of it?
I have, but I always thought it was a bit woo-woo, you know?
I understand, but Brewer presents it in a very grounded and practical way.
So what's his take on mindfulness?
He emphasizes that it's not about suppressing feelings or trying to achieve some blissful state of constant calm.
Okay.
It's about becoming aware of your thoughts and feelings as they arise without judgment.
So it's about observing those thoughts and feelings instead of getting swept away by them.
Exactly. It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot.
And choosing a more skillful response.
Right. He uses this great analogy of the brain being like a car stuck in first gear.
Okay.
Reacting instinctively to every perceived threat. Mindfulness helps us shift gears,
I like that.
giving us more control over how we respond to anxiety.
So how does mindfulness actually work in practice? Does he give us specific techniques?
He does. He explores practices like the RAIN technique, noting physical sensations and cultivating curiosity about your experience.
We'll have to dive into those more in the next part of our deep dive.
Definitely, there's a lot more to explore.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Let's take a closer look at those practical tools next time.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were starting to dig into this idea of mindfulness as a way to manage anxiety.
It seemed like a really promising approach.
Definitely. But how do we actually make it work in our lives?
Right. It can't just be this vague concept.
Exactly. Luckily, Brewer gives us real tools to use.
That's great. I'm all about practical advice.
Me too. And one technique that really stood out to me was the RAIN practice.
RAIN.
Yes, it stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture.
Okay, I'm already intrigued just by the acronym.
It's a powerful way to work with those difficult emotions, anxiety being a big one.
So how would we actually use RAIN when we're feeling anxious?
The first step is simply recognizing what's happening. You acknowledge that anxiety is present without judging it, just noticing it's there.
So we're not trying to push it away or pretend it's not there.
Exactly. We're just observing it with a sense of curiosity.
And what about those physical sensations that come with anxiety?
Those are important too. Pay attention to how anxiety shows up in your body.
Like that tightness in your chest or that racing heart feeling.
Precisely. Those are all signals that your body is in fight or flight mode.
So we're tuning into those physical sensations as well.
Yes. And the next step is allowing the feeling to be there.
That sounds hard. We're so used to resisting uncomfortable emotions.
I know it can be counterintuitive, but allowing doesn't mean you like it or give in to it.
It just means making space for it.
Exactly, without judgment.
This is where the mindfulness comes in, right?
Absolutely. We're practicing observing instead of suppressing.
Becoming curious observers of our own inner experience.
Love that. And once you've recognized and allowed the anxiety, you move into investigation.
Investigation.
This is where you get curious about the experience.
What kind of questions would we ask ourselves?
You might ask, what physical sensations am I noticing? What thoughts are popping up? What stories am I telling myself about this situation?
It's like we're turning inward and exploring our own mental landscape.
With a magnifying glass, not running away in fear.
I like that. And finally, we arrive at nurture.
This stage involves offering yourself compassion and kindness.
So it's like we're being our own best friend.
Exactly. You might offer yourself calming words or visualize a sense of warmth and comfort.
I can see how this whole RAIN process could be so helpful for managing anxiety
It gives you a clear structure to approach those overwhelming feelings.
and respond with more skill and self-care.
And the beauty of RAIN is its versatility. You can use it anytime, anywhere.
Whether you're feeling a slight twinge of anxiety or a full-blown panic attack,
Exactly. It helps you move away from those automatic reactions.
and towards a more grounded, intentional space.
I love that you mentioned intention because that's a key element of mindfulness.
Right, it's about choosing our responses rather than just reacting blindly.
You got it. And another technique that Brewer talks about is noting.
Noting.
It's deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful.
How does it work?
It involves labeling your thoughts and feelings as they emerge.
So, for example, if I'm feeling anxious,
You might simply note to yourself, anxious.
or if my mind is racing.
You might note thinking.
So it's about creating a little distance between ourselves and our thoughts and feelings.
Precisely by labeling them, you're acknowledging their presence without getting swept away by them.
It's like saying, oh, hello, anxiety, I see you there.
Exactly. You're not trying to fight it or ignore it.
You're just noticing it.
And that simple act of noticing can be incredibly powerful.
Because it helps us to disentangle ourselves from those thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. It's like we're becoming less reactive and more responsive.
I like that. And we talked earlier about anxiety sobriety.
Oh, right.
Can we dive a little deeper into that? I'm curious about how it connects to addiction recovery.
Absolutely. Just like recovering from substance dependence anxiety, sobriety is about learning to navigate life without relying on your usual anxiety habits.
So it's about breaking free from those deeply ingrained patterns.
Of worry, avoidance, and overthinking.
The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety entirely then?
No, it's about transforming our relationship with it.
So we're accepting that anxiety is a normal human emotion.
But we're learning to handle it in a more skillful way.
It's like learning to surf those waves of anxiety without getting wiped out.
That's a great analogy. And just like mastering any new skill, it takes time and practice.
And a whole lot of self-compassion.
Definitely, we need to be kind to ourselves throughout this process.
One thing that really stood out to me in unwinding anxiety was the emphasis on curiosity.
Curiosity is such a powerful antidote to fear and worry.
It's about approaching our anxiety with an open mind.
Instead of resistance and judgment.
Brewer even describes how cultivating curiosity can physically shift our brain chemistry.
It can guide us away from that fight or flight response.
And into a more receptive, relaxed state.
When we're curious, we're open to new possibilities.
It's like we're inviting our brains to explore new ways of being.
And he introduces this fascinating metaphor of the bigger, better offer, or BBO.
BBO.
It's about finding more rewarding and fulfilling ways to meet our needs.
So instead of reaching for those familiar but unhelpful anxiety habits,
we start exploring alternative behaviors that genuinely enhance our well-being.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you're feeling anxious and tempted to scroll mindlessly through social media.
Been there.
A BBO might be going for a walk in nature, practicing meditation, or connecting with someone you love.
So it's about choosing activities that nourish our minds and bodies.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
By consciously choosing activities that make us feel good.
We're creating new neural pathways that support our well-being.
But how do we figure out what those BBOs are, what truly offers a bigger, better experience for our brains?
That's where self-awareness comes in.
So we need to pay attention to how different activities make us feel.
Both in the moment and afterward.
We're tuning into those subtle cues from our bodies and minds.
Exactly. Noticing what brings us joy, peace, and a sense of connection.
And what works for one person may not work for another.
Absolutely. It's about finding what resonates with your unique needs and values.
Are there any specific BBOs that Brewer highlights in the book?
One of the most powerful ones he emphasizes is the practice of loving kindness.
Loving kindness. I'll be honest, that sounds a bit cheesy to me.
I understand, but it's not about forcing yourself to feel something you don't.
It's about nurturing those seeds of compassion that already exist within us.
Exactly.
So how do you actually practice loving kindness?
One common method is to start by directing loving kindness toward yourself.
Okay.
You might repeat phrases like, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful.
It kind of reminds me of those positive affirmations you see on social media.
The format is similar, but the intention is different with loving kindness. You're not trying to convince yourself of anything or force a specific outcome.
You're simply offering yourself a gentle, loving embrace.
Acknowledging your inherent worthiness of happiness and peace.
I could see how that could be really powerful, especially if you struggle with self-criticism.
Absolutely. And once you've cultivated a sense of loving kindness toward yourself, you can gradually extend it outward. Start with loved ones, then expand to neutral individuals, and eventually even to those you find challenging.
It's like you're radiating those positive vibes outward.
Creating a ripple effect of compassion and kindness.
I love that. And the beauty of loving kindness is that it benefits both the giver and the receiver.
It's a practice that can transform your relationship with yourself and the world around you.
It's amazing how Brewer weaves together science, personal stories, and practical techniques in this book.
He really does. He makes a convincing argument that we have the power to break free from those anxiety loops.
And cultivate a life filled with peace and well-being.
It's not about attaining some perfect state of calmness.
It's about developing tools and practices that empower us to navigate the ups and downs of life.
With more skill and ease.
I feel like we've covered so much ground already.
We have, but there's still more to explore.
What else does Brewer have in store for us?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of his thoughts on developing a more curious and kind approach to life, even amidst challenges. We'll also delve into those fucking growth opportunities he calls FGOs.
I love that term. It's so real and relatable.
It is, and I think you'll find Brewer's perspective on FGOs incredibly insightful and empowering.
I can't wait to hear more about those.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back for the final part of our exploration into unwinding anxiety.
Okay, so we're back, and I'm really excited to unpack these fucking growth opportunities, these FGOs.
Yes, the FGOs, they really are a brilliant concept.
I know, such a catchy phrase, right?
It is, but beyond the, colorful language, it's a really profound idea.
So remind me, what are FGOs again?
Well, Brewers uses FGOs to describe those moments when we stumble or make mistakes.
We've all been there.
We have, and it's in those moments when we often turn on ourselves with self-judgment and shame.
Like those times you cringe at something you said or did.
Exactly, or when you just feel like you messed up.
Those "did I really just do that" moments.
Precisely, and it's in those instances that we have a choice.
Okay, a choice between what?
We can either spiral into self-blame and regret.
Which is what most of us do naturally, I think.
It's a very common reaction, but we can also choose to view those experiences as opportunities.
Opportunities for what?
For growth and learning.
So instead of beating ourselves up,
We can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this?
it's a total mindset shift.
It is, and it's not always easy, but it's so worth it.
Brewer emphasizes that self-compassion is key here.
Absolutely. Self-compassion is essential for turning those FGOs into something positive.
So how do we actually practice self-compassion?
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend.
Someone we care about.
Exactly. Recognizing that we're all imperfect beings doing the best we can.
It's like giving ourselves a break.
It is, and it's not about condoning harmful behavior.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
We all make mistakes, and it's how we respond to those mistakes that really matters.
I love how he tells that story about the embarrassing college incident
Oh, yes, in the dining hall.
when he made that insensitive comment.
Oh, yeah. It's something he carried with him for years.
It's like those memories that just haunt you.
But through mindfulness and self-compassion, he was able to forgive himself.
And it wasn't about minimizing the impact on the other person.
It was about releasing himself from the burden of shame and regret.
He learned from that experience.
And he was able to move forward.
That's a really powerful example of how to turn an FGO into something positive.
It is, and it highlights the transformative power of self-forgiveness.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into unwinding anxiety, I'm really struck by the book's overall message of hope.
It's not about achieving some perfect state of Zen
It's about equipping ourselves with tools and practices.
that empower us to navigate life's challenges.
Anxiety is a natural part of life.
It's not the enemy.
But when it starts to control us,
That's when we need to find new ways of relating to it.
mindfulness offers a path forward.
It allows us to become more aware of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations,
So we can step out of those habitual patterns of worry and avoidance.
and respond to life with more clarity and compassion.
And along the way, we discover those bigger, better offers.
The BBOs.
Those activities that nourish our well-being.
And bring us joy and fulfillment.
It's a journey.
With its ups and downs,
But with practice and self-compassion,
we can learn to ride the waves of anxiety.
and create a more peaceful and meaningful life.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
I agree. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into unwinding anxiety.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
And that you'll continue to explore these ideas on your own.
Until next time, take care and keep diving.